In many ways, my wife and I feel as though we're running the second lap around the track. The first lap was our own childhood and adolescence, the experiences that lead to adulthood. The second, watching our children and many of those same experiences. The most recent happened a few weeks ago when our 7th grade son came home 2 weeks from finishing school when he said, "Do you realize to pass 7th grade, I have to pass a comprehensive final exam?" He was surprised when they said, or they expected him to be responsible for everything that he had learned throughout the year. I think that same element of surprise is behind the text that was read for us just a few moments ago from Matthew chapter 25. It's the apocalyptic vision where all the nations of the earth are gathered before the Son of Man. The comprehensive final exam is simple, really. How did you treat the least of these? The least of these. We see their faces and we know their stories. They come to our churches and they live in our cities. They are the hungry and the thirsty. They are the stranger in need of clothing and shelter. And I dare say that most every congregation represented here understands that at the heart of the gospel is how we treat the least. For over 5 years of my life, I had the opportunity to serve in a downtown congregation of a city of 110,000 people. You probably know the story. Early in that city's existence, downtown was the hub. Everyone came there. And the churches that were built downtown thrived in that Christendom culture. But somewhere along the way, things began to change. The suburbs grew, and people had to drive by 10 to 15 good churches to come to our church in downtown. And yet, surrounding us day in and day out were the least of these, the hungry and the hurting. One of my favorites was a woman whose name was Wanda. She came to us via our Wednesday evening meal. And as we were gathered together, we invited people to introduce guests at their table. And a member of our church stood up and said, "This is Wanda." And she stood and she did her hands like this as we greeted her into our midst. Wanda and I had many experiences together, not the least of which is when she called me on her birthday. She said, "Pastor, it's my birthday." I said, "Congratulations, Wanda." She said, "I was wondering, could you give me a little money?" I said, "Wanda, it's really not our practice to give you money on your birthday." But I learned something in my relationship with Wanda. The line between the helper and the helped was blurred. And when I think back upon our relationship, I hope that I have given as much to her as her memory continues to give to me. The least of these, they are at the heart of the mission of God, and ministering to the least has been at the heart of this fellowship of Baptist Christians. In 2001, based on the inspiring work of our brothers and sisters in the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship of Alabama, we started Together for Hope, the Rural Poverty Initiative, which said that we were going to commit ourselves to the 20 poorest counties in the United States. A commitment of 20 years to serve the least, bringing them the hope that we have found in Jesus Christ. to serve the least is not only at the heart of the gospel, it is and will continue to be at the heart of this fellowship. And yet we must do more than simply come together and consider methodology, ways in which we can be better at clothing and feeding, serving and welcoming. While methodology is important, I would dare to suggest that this text, Matthew chapter 25, encourages us to do more. For past our methodology, and at the heart of this text, is Christology. It is the question, who is the risen Christ? And what is Christ calling us to do and to be? Maybe to think about the Christology of this text, we need to go back and look once again at the identity of those who are called the least of these. Commentators and scholars are divided, really. There is no clear consensus. I suspect that most of us visualize those who are in need of food or clothing. But there are some who suggest that the least of these are not those that we see in our towns and in our shelters, but rather they are those who have accepted the radical and risky mission of God in the world as communicated to them by Jesus Christ. It shouldn't surprise us, really, that this could be the case. Think about the life of Christ, the one who came from God, loving the unloved, serving all, and embracing all, inviting them to be a part of the reign of God in the world. And finally, in that moment of greatest risk, when death was visited upon Jesus, he received the unexpected grace of resurrection. He was raised by God. Maybe this text is suggesting to us that when we take a risk, we will find friends that we never knew that we had. And we will find the power of God at work in us in ways that astound and call forth our deepest praise. When Christ in the Gospel of Mark sent out his followers on this risky, gospel-filled mission, you remember what he told them, don't you? Take nothing. Don't take a purse. Don't take a bag. Don't take any money. Just go with your friend and do my work. And if you dare to take that risk, you will find friends along the way. That's not just the story of the gospel, it's the story of the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship. For I would suggest to you that we have been and will continue to be at our best when we are willing to risk, to be a part of the grace-filled mission of God in the world. My entry into fellowship life started when I attended the George W. Truett Theological Seminary at Baylor University in 1994. In 1991, under the courageous and bold leadership of Dr. Herb Reynolds, Baylor decided that they would begin a seminary because Dr. Reynolds was able to see what was happening in the Southern Baptist Convention. That theological education was well on its way to becoming theological indoctrination, and we had to do something different. He chartered, along with the regents of Baylor, George W. Truett Theological Seminary, and what happened immediately after? The regents and administration began to talk about where will we house these students who are going to come. And the First Baptist Church of Waco raised its hand and said, "We will host you." When we take a risk, We will find that we have friends that we never knew that we had. That story is not unique to Truett alone. It is a story that is shared by our seminaries and divinity schools, our partners along the way who have dared to risk something and find the strength and power of God that comes from friendship.